I know everything about them, so I was like research and I read all the books, so like no.
This is color, really?
That's how it seems to be a bit more.
I think not.
They come from
This is color. And contrast, like never before. With the groundbreaking 4-pixel OLED technology and a revolutionary curved screen, you're no longer watching TV, you're immersing yourself in it. It's television redefined. It's all possible with the LG OLED TV.
Hey guys, thanks for coming along and for that little wait. This is a bit of a mega panel. This is going to be a good one. It's about the what comes after next gen. So it'll be a pretty informal discussion about where gaming is going long term. Now I'll introduce everyone one by one. First up, Tara Brannigan from Pickpot Games. Do you want to come up, Tara? Big hand of applause. Nice to see you.
You too.
All right, next up we have Dr. Mark Sager, currently creating an AI brain. Won a couple of Oscars just casually for his work with Weta. Mark, come on up. Next up we have Jeff Nuss from Assembly, a very talented man. Come to the stage. All right, Michael Reed, producer at Crytek. You may have played a few of their games. They make some pretty good ones. Big hand of applause. And finally, he's the man who's been annihilating multiple people out there, DOTCOM. Big round of applause. Hello, it's such a pleasure to have you guys here. Look, I thought first off, can we just start by, can you just quickly tell us what you're up to in the industry at the moment? Why are you into games?
So I guess that starts with me. I just hopped over here from the States. I'm currently at Pickpot Games, where I'm the customer relationship manager, basically trying to build better relationships between the actual developers and the customers. I feel like that's going to be really important going forward, not just in the casual space, but overall.
Yeah, well, I'm into games because I think the technology of having everything interactive is really it's media which blows film out of the water, because basically you can do anything. There's infinite possibilities. So, we're looking at building brains to put in the characters so that they've actually got their own electronic life. So the characters will remember what you do, they'll have generated emotions, they'll actually have motivations and desires. And so we think that with that we can basically make the games into a real type of world where you're literally dealing with people-like characters.
Jeff.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in games because they're interactive, and interactivity is a really interesting storytelling medium, I believe. And I feel like games is the first step, but there'll be interactive art and sort of like movies and television. There'll be lots of different stories that can be told through interactivity. And games is step one, but I think we'll keep going further.
So yeah, I mean, in short, I love games. I mean, I think everybody up here does to a certain extent. But it's really like it's a journey into the unknown in a lot of ways with interactivity. And it's always fascinating. You don't see in a lot of industries where you get all these various personalities together, from artists, programmers, to QA folks, and getting them in the same room and getting them to work together in doing things that have never been done before. And it's always constantly advancing. And especially working at Crytek, there's a lot of great people and talented individuals that come from film and games and all over the place. So it's really bringing that all together and not really knowing what's going to happen from one day to the next.
And Kim.
Well, I have always been an avid gamer. I started with a little Atari and then Commodore 64 and Amiga. So I've followed the whole evolution of games from the start, and it's just incredible where we are today. And if you think that maybe we are halfway there, where we are going to be in another 20 years, I'm totally excited to see what is going to happen.
I mean, Kim, what are your big predictions for where gaming is going to go?
Well, at some point, we're going to figure out how our brain stores data, and once we understand that, maybe we can, input data into the brain differently, other than with our sensory capabilities. Meaning you play the game in your brain, and not on a screen anymore, and not with a controller anymore. But this might be 50 or 100 years from now. But I'm pretty confident that at some point in the future we're going to figure out the brain, be able to simulate it. And once we can do that, you can basically transfer yourself into some kind of device and play games in that universe. Pretty complex stuff.
What do you guys make of that?
Well, I reckon it's actually feasible. There's a whole bunch of different things going on. Like there's retinal implant technology, there's hearing implant technology, and so there's sensory input, and you can also project direct onto the retina from different things. And so the sensory input is possible to do that. And then you can imagine things like universes as rich as like Avatar basically will be in your surround, and you'll experience that, and then you'll have all the characters reacting to you, and you'll be able to play any character you want. You could even be a dinosaur. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just so very exciting.
And I think some of the character stuff that he was showing at his talk yesterday, we were just talking about that off the floor, which is what Kim was talking about with getting further inside, but also on the outside of like even things like I was imagining Connect with his titles with like RPGs and Skyrim, to be able to smile at characters or get angry at them and have their emotions kind of feed back, and creating more of a dynamic gameplay element where it's different every time you approach it. So I think that between the two of them, I mean, this is really deep, but this is like doable at this point. But you never know, like 20 years down the road, and where we're going to be at with maybe implants in the brain or something. I don't know. That's a little scary.
I'm keen to just step back to where we are now. As far as the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 goes, what's your take on that tech so far? Are you leaning either way?
Well, I have to lean one way, so not really. I mean, it's a balance between both of them. Some people are saying this is more powerful than this, or the other one's more powerful than the other. At the end of the day, it's going to boil down to what the software development kits are like, and what the libraries are like, and what the developers have access to. And that's going to be built over time. But I'm all about the Xbox right now.
Obviously, the technology is going to jump as well, but I mean, games more and more, it's an emotional journey that you're being, taken along on. Are we going to see big changes in how we're drawn into these games and what we actually feel when we play them?
So I think the big missing element at the moment is the psychological aspect of games. If you think about any sort of psychological thriller, the camera will be right in on the forehead of somebody, and you'll see them with veins pulsing, and you get all these psychological moments which build up the tension, and the tiny eye movements are giving away all this stuff about the character, so that when we're actually simulating the emotions of these characters, we can start driving that, so we can really bring games to a whole new psychological level.
And I think in addition to that, we're also going to start seeing a lot more diversity in the stories that are told. We're starting to see the elements of that coming out now, and it's a really exciting time to be part of games. I mean, Gone Home is just, at its surface level, it's a game, but what it really is this emotional experience that's telling a story that hasn't been told in games previously. And now that's so much more accessible. People have these tools. They can tell their stories in a way that wasn't previously available. I mean, how frequently do you even see a game that has a protagonist that isn't, a straight white male, that's physically able? Now we have this capability to tell every sort of story out there, and people are really starting to see that there's a market for that. And I'm really excited to see those stories.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And the way I think about it is sort of, if you look at the history of other art forms and other mediums, if you go back to when photography was first developed, and if you wanted to take a photo, you had to be a chemist. You had to make your own plates. You had to make your own slides. You had to develop it yourself. If you wanted to go outside and take a photo, you had a horse cart that you took with your whole darkroom in the back, and you developed it right there and then. So the first photographers had to be chemists, and I feel like the first game developers had to have this kind of engineering understanding that is quite high level and quite hard. But as photography, eventually you had labs you could take your film to, and you had the Brownie camera that anyone could take on the street, and suddenly it was open to more people with different ideas and different backgrounds. So not just engineers or chemists anymore, but people who had different visual ideas, or they wanted to go find the poorest people and show the rest of the world what was happening here, and kind of engender empathy and all sorts of other things that I think art and storytelling can do. And I feel interactivity has even more potential to do those things, because you read a novel and you can kind of see through the eyes of the character. You can kind of understand why they're behaving in this way. But when you play the game and you find yourself behaving in a way that, especially if it's a way that you would find appalling, or you've seen your whole life, but suddenly now you understand it because you've come at it through this way, and you see the steps that brought you to this point, and now you're behaving that way. I feel like that's really powerful and not something that can happen in any other medium. So I feel like that's to me what's exciting, is now that the technology and the tools are becoming more available and more people are getting interested in it than just the engineers and the chemists, that the stories will get better and what they're saying will get better.
Kim, obviously you're bloody good at playing games. Do you have an urge to get into the gaming industry, do you think, itself?
I always wanted to, you know, and the funny thing is, I mean, I've seen so many trends coming that I knew are going to happen, you know, in-game purchases. I mean, I thought about this 10 years ago. You know, all this stuff is happening now, and I always feel that if I was going to get involved in that, I could create a better game than the one that is currently my favorite, because I know what's wrong with it, I know how I would want to fix it. So ultimately, I mean, I would love to do something in the gaming industry.
What got you into games originally? I know this is sort of going in the wrong direction here, but what was the first game that made you guys, you know, love the act of sitting down and playing a video game?
So for me, my dad built a game of Pong, and it was on a tobacco tin, and it had two little potentiometers, and it played Pong on the TV. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually have our digital artificially intelligent baby learn to play Pong. We're going to do that hopefully by the end of the year. So we're actually going to have artificial intelligence want to play a game and play this very first game. So we're going to kind of try to close the loop on that.
This is how the end of the world starts, man.
Tiny T1
It's already started.
Tara?
So I started with a lot of console games, but I wouldn't have considered myself a gamer at that point. Like I got to the point where I could play through Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and beat it in like an hour and a half. But the game that really made me a gamer was actually Doom. I got the shareware version of that and went, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. And I just played that game religiously, and I started buying gaming magazines and getting kind of obsessive, and I actually emailed John Romero, and he wrote back like this 2-page how to get into games, and like that was really what did it for me. And I'm actually really surprised that replaying Doom, I still remember where every single secret is, and yeah, it just kills me how much of my memory is dedicated to that.
I think, the game that really got me into gaming was Space Quest, an old Sierra game on the computer. And my uncle just dropped off a whole box of floppy disks that he had downloaded from some nefarious BBS back then. But I learned to type so I could play these games, and then I learned to kind of make these boot disks, because if you wanted to get the game to work, you had to set up a boot disk with all the right memory and all this and that. And so I learned how to program so I could play the games, and then eventually, like, Doom came along, and I wanted to make levels for my friends, so I got the level editor, and before I knew it, I was a programmer, and it was all just because I loved games, and I wanted to make the games and know how they worked, and
Yeah, my history is pretty deep with that. I mean, I think it was my parents weren't really tech-savvy individuals, so they would like, oh, here's a computer. They'd throw like a Texas Instruments TI-99 in my room, cartridge on the side, and playing games like that, and then, you know, moving through with having an Intellivision in my house to NES, to my mother going to Hong Kong and bringing games back for me. Yet I always used to get yelled at for playing too many games, but they were like supplying my habit, right? So that sort of evolved through, you know, a series of things, playing through, you know, the old Sierra games and I never got into like text-based text-based games with Zork and those kinds of games. Actually, I went back. I know there's some Java ones out there recently that I went back and tried out, but I need that visual reference. And then I've been a multiplayer gamer for I don't know how long. I mean, I'm always into. I love the psychology and social interactions that happen in multiplayer games, and I always look for communities that really lend itself to that. And I find with heavy team games and things like that, like probably my top game in the last 5-10 years, it has to be like Team Fortress 2, and not because it's just because it's a fantastic game and it's very well balanced, and there hats and things like that added in. But, I don't really pay much attention to that. The people that I've met throughout that, and I mean, having played MMOs, having been working in MMOs for EVE Online, for instance, taught me a lot about gaming in general, and the social interactions that happen in those games, and sort of why I'm drawn to that, especially with heavy team-based elements.
Actually, I've got to just add, one of my favourite things was Battlefield 1942. And you get in the planes, and I can remember jumping on the wing of a plane, another guy probably across the world somewhere started piloting the plane. I was standing on the plane with a bazooka, and we're having dogfights and planes coming in the background, and it was just so crazy and so fun. It was awesome.
Well, for me, it really all started, it got exciting with multiplayer, right? So playing games against the computer wasn't really a challenge anymore. Just could beat it all the time. So multiplayer got me hooked. And then the second big event that happened for me was Quake 2, when 3D engines got really advanced, and you would be in this map and in this world, and everything would feel so real. So the combination of playing against people that are really good, that have a brain and are skilled and give you a challenge, and the ever advancing 3D engines, that's where we are today. I mean, multiplayer for me is definitely the best experience.
How many people were online when you became the champ?
How many people? 15 million.
It's unreal. This sort of the uncanny valley that they talk about with when you just look at a game character and it's just slightly off. We're not quite there to facial realistic animation. Any idea when we're going to crack that? Any sort of guesstimates there?
I think it's not too far from. There's always going to be levels of detail that go into. That's what I was talking about. With keep pushing the camera closer, but it's getting closer and closer. There's some pretty cool new technologies coming out now. I think we'll see. I think in probably about 3 years, it'll be in every game. Will be at a much higher standard. So, but it also comes down to the appropriateness of the action, and so that you can have one thing as appearance, the other thing is the quality of the animation and the reaction and the appropriateness. Any one of those things breaks it. Like at the moment, if it's something like say Heavy Rain or whatever, you'll have a character that'll be stuck in a motion capture loop, and those are things which break the reality. So, but when you've got self-motivated characters that have goals that do things which work in that world, that won't break that.
I think going too realistic can almost be the wrong way to go. It's sort of if you see a really basic pixely characters 3 pixels high, and it's like when you look at a game of chess, you don't say, why does a pawn not look like a little person? It's allowed to be abstract. It's abstracted in a way that your mind is able to kind of just go into the gameplay and see this world, and it's you and this other person, and versus once it becomes a 3D world that you're looking through in your screen, your mind just thinks, I'm looking through a window into another world, and it just starts picking apart all the things that are wrong. It doesn't allow for that abstraction to work. So I think if you go too realistic, you just have to get everything right, or it all feels wrong. But if you just stay abstract, you can just do things that are a lot more out there, because the person will kind of be investing some of their own imagination into it. That's why I think like a game like Minecraft is so amazing, because kids love it. They're totally addicted to it, and it's probably got the most basic 3D. It looks like it was like 3 generations ago, but because it allows the kid to inject their imagination into this world, it's huge, and it's amazing what people have been doing with it.
What do you think of people's, thanks to cell phones and stuff, people's shitty short attention spans and everything? Is that an issue when it comes to developing games, capturing people's attention for long enough?
I guess it's all about integrating at this point now, right? I mean, between, smart glass apps and, dual screen gaming and all of these things, I think as long as it's not like a forced sort of thing, but it's more of a back and forth or an added ability that adds to that experience. It's bringing that world of where we are with smartphones and how people use those, and bringing that more into the game world as an additive, and not as something that I'm going to make you look at this screen because you have to. So I mean, attention spans of people have probably getting smaller over the years. I mean, we talk in 140 characters on Twitter these days, and Facebook a little bit more. But yeah, it's really about integrating those. It's really about integrating those two things, but not having it really be a violation, but more of an enhancement of the experience.
Yeah, some of the work we're looking into doing is with things like autism therapy and also education, where you're paying attention to what the computer can see what the kid is doing. So if the player is not paying attention, the computer can realise that, and then you can actually change the behaviour. So it starts trying to get your attention. So you can start having the game, I'm going a bit out in the future here, but the game can adapt to you.
And I think there's really space for both. I've seen a lot of flack, casual games. A lot of the games that we all started on would be considered a casual game today, but they fulfill different needs as well. A hardcore gamer is almost always also a casual gamer. We fiddle around on our phones at the bus stop, or we're just trying to relax, we want something mindless for the next hour. And then we end up playing for 3 hours because it's actually a lot of fun, and it fulfills this niche that, maybe sitting around in a stealth game for 2 hours is just not going to accomplish. I want to unwind sometimes, and I don't want to be in a high-stress situation, but I will totally go play Giant Boulder of Death for an hour and a half and, have people scream in terror.
Look, just before we throw it out to the audience, I work in a newsroom where about every month we do a big story on how games are getting more realistic and creating a whole bunch of bloody murdering idiots. What's your take on that as games get more and more realistic? Is that something we've got to think about, or is that just something that is just a media-fueled, fear-mongering, made-up thing?
I like to answer that.
Yeah, please do, Kim.
So the way I see it is that the games that we play today are certainly numbing our emotions. Because when you run around and you kill people in a game and you see the blood splatter and you see them dead on the floor, if you see that happening in the real world, it doesn't affect you so much anymore. So we're living in a cooler world today because of the kinds of games that we have, right? But I think at the end of the day, it's still the job of the parents to prepare their kids for this new reality, and to make sure that they still understand that one thing is a game and the other thing is the real life. And if you see someone getting hurt in the real life, it's completely different to the game experience. But I think it will just get more and more extreme. I mean, over the last 10 years, when you look at the evolution of games, there came a time when they introduced blood. There was no blood in games for a very long time, and then they introduced arms and legs being gone and massive explosions and So I think that trend will continue, and over time it will change society to be cooler, to be colder to their environment and to people that are in actual wars and actual problems. You don't see it as such a bad thing anymore. When I watched TV as a kid, and someone got stabbed and there was some blood, people were like, wow, this is crazy, how can they show this on TV? Right? Today, Mona's brothers are just 10 years old. That's normal, even on comedy, on cartoon networks, where they cut the heads off cartoon figures and stuff like this. So, there's definitely a trend here, and it's just the job of the parents to make sure that they adapt to these new realities and teach their kids still to understand the difference.
I think I totally agree with that, and I think that one of the things that games can actually do is they can actually change behaviour, and you can do it in a socially positive way. Like if you're playing a game and you do a bad action to a character, and the other characters start treating you differently because of that. We were talking about The Walking Dead before, because it's like if you have the characters, say you go and you just torture somebody, and then the other characters start avoiding you. Your fun has stopped because you want to go into that game and interact with other characters, but if all the other characters are avoiding you because you've done something nasty, that will actually change your behaviour, and it will actually force you to start to be a little bit more, kind in your behaviour. So you can still have a fantastically exciting game, but you can manipulate what the social response is, and it's just like in the real world. The real world is all about reciprocity. It's about you do something good for somebody, they'll do something good for you, and vice versa. And it's like that is something where you add that element to a game, you're now having a moral game, and I think that in terms of like building reality in games, you're just going up another level there, where you've got now a social reality and a moral reality, and you chuck that in again with everything else, and you've got this pretty incredible simulation which is firing off so many parts of your brain.
And we do have some responsibility as game developers as well to look at the experiences that we're creating, the reason why we're doing it, and how that could potentially impact the audience who's playing it. And we do have to also look at the side when somebody comes back and says, hey, I played this and it really hurt me because XYZ, to not take offense at that, but to rather learn why and what can we do in the future to, at least acknowledge and understand where that person is coming from. Taking the stance of like, I don't want to hear it because this is the thing I wanted to make is not going to allow us to grow as an industry, and it's not going to bring more people into the fold, which is what we want.
Well, thanks so much.
I think that ultimately we are going to figure out how the brain really works, how it stores data. We'll be able to simulate that inside a computer, a very powerful computer, and then we will be able to basically transfer everything that's up here into that machine. And once you do that, you achieve that all your memories and who you are can be stored forever, and you can then live in that world. You can create basically your own universe and feel sensations and everything just like you do now in your biological body, but in a digital space. So that prediction is probably a few hundred years out, and we will all not experience that. But if they watch this in 400 years, they will go, wow, Kim.com, he really knew this shit.
Mike?
I don't know if I can top that one out, but shorter periods of time on things. I'm not a Nostradamus like this guy.
Da Vinci.
What's that?
Da Vinci.
Yeah, right. There's so many ways that I think games are going to evolve over the next, at least 10 years. Things like this and the technologies that we have in talking on this panel. Things are rapidly moving so fast these days that when we look at the last 5 years and how technology has moved, it's really in one thing into the next. I don't have any solid predictions at this point. I can't really go into that. I wish I did.
Right, moving on.
I'll have to leave it there, but it's anybody's guess.
All good.
I think in 2060, a young girl will peel off her VR headset and her headphone plugs and her electrodes and step outside into the sun, and it'll burn her pale skin, and she'll pick up a cable and reinvent jump rope.
Love it. Mark?
So, already I went to a talk just the other week about implants in the brain, and they're sitting on the surface of the brain. There's 1,000 electrodes there, and you've probably seen the stuff on the news where you've got monkeys essentially controlling robotic arms. And this was a tetraplegic person being able to pick up a cup of coffee and drinking that coffee. Now, if you start mapping because the brain basically makes maps of behaviour. If we end up having an interface where we can actually map the electrical activity on the brain, then you have a direct this is kind of what Kim's saying. It's like, so this is a way off. I'll put this at 2036 and a half. And so basically, that you'll have all that activity coming straight out. And now the cool thing is, everybody will have this, and we'll all live in this crazy, amazing, super conscious world where everything's all connected. It's like the collective unconscious brought into the electronic realm.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
That's it.
Why am I the last person here? I'm going to go a lot shorter term. I'm going to go in the 5 to 10 year mark.
Yeah.
I think technology is like the Oculus Rift. I don't know if you guys got a chance to play with that, but I totally thought that was just going to be, it's going to be another 3D glasses, no big deal. And then I did the roller coaster thing, and the second it went up to the side, I literally started falling over. It completely tripped the wires in my brain. And I think we're going to see some really amazing experiences come out of things like that, and like Cast AR, extending gameplay experiences into more of an interactive experience, but not just in the gaming space, but being able to use those tools for like physical therapy, or maybe being able to see a art museum when you're not able to travel. Those sorts of experiences that are more rich and inclusive. I think that's going to be a lot sooner than I would have thought a couple of years ago. Like just playing with that totally changed my mind about it.
Well, thanks so much, you guys.
Yours.
Yeah, thank you.
Mine.
Yeah.